Welcome back to the On the Air podcast. We've been on hiatus for a while. Hope you enjoyed last week with Glenn Geffer. That was an interview I've been sitting on for a while and just kind of never got around to posting until last week. And now we have a brand new interview. And we started this podcast because I wanted to meet some of the younger guys in the industry. And this is maybe the youngest guy we've gotten the chance to have on. And also one of the biggest, Mike Monaco for the ACC network and formerly the Big Ten network with the Boston Red Sox. He's kind of bouncing all around. Mike, thanks so much for joining us and hanging around with us today.
Aiden, I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for inviting me on. It's interesting. I don't feel like one of the youngest. My body maybe would disagree with that compared to how it used to be. But in all seriousness, great to be on. Thanks for the invitation.
So I'll kind of jump right into it there because you gave me a great segue with the age. You said you don't feel like the youngest. Does that mean, is that kind of changed over time since you've started working professionally with Big Ten Network and ACC Network? Have you kind of aged into this career, you feel like?
It's funny. I guess I say that more just, on a personal level. It's, I've been out of college now for longer than I was in college. And, our college buddies were always reminiscent about the glory days and how things were. We went to Notre Dame and how things were. I was back there for a wedding a couple of weeks ago and seeing how different campus is. But no, on the career side of things, it's been an absolutely fun journey, and I'm really grateful for the opportunities I've had.
So you talked about college at Notre Dame. I'm curious because we've had guys from Syracuse, guys from Fordham. We've had guys from a ton of different schools. I've heard so much about Notre Dame. I feel like that's one of the schools that has really risen over the years. What was your experience there? What kind of games did you get? Why don't you give everybody kind of the recruiting pitch for Notre Dame? What is their program like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say even aside from broadcasting, just a wonderfully special place as far as an institution goes, and the people there and the students and the faculty and the professors and truly everyone. Like it sounds, maybe cliche to say, and I know everyone's going to love their college experience, but just on that level, like it is a place that's really special to me and to a lot of other people, because of the people that are there and how great a place it is. On the broadcasting side of things, it's a situation where I was a student at a time when a lot of places, not just Notre Dame, were starting to stream sporting events more. So it was, a really cool opportunity for me at that time to start broadcasting different sports. And I didn't go to college like a lot of people do, but not all, knowing that I wanted to broadcast. But when I was there, I found broadcasting. I loved broadcasting, and I just kind of ran with it. And there were so many great opportunities, even, at my point when I was a student there, whether it was on the student radio side, but then with the athletic department, like I said, streaming a lot of events. And that's only grown like it has at almost every school. Like I remember when we were first doing games at Notre Dame, a couple games that were going to be picked up on ESPN 3. And that to us was the coolest thing. The employees in the athletic department and for student broadcasters, that was really special. And that's only grown now. It's like a prerequisite to a Division I college having something like that. And the quality of broadcasting and production has just gone up across the board. So I do feel lucky that I was there at a time when a lot of those things were newer. And so I got opportunities that I probably wouldn't even be qualified to get now if I were a student.
I'm curious, as somebody who's going to a school that is going to have a pretty big sports department and athletic department and major Division I sports, did that really help you kind of hone your craft, getting to do Notre Dame football, Notre Dame basketball, Notre Dame baseball, real high level athletics early on?
Definitely. And I wouldn't focus on my own experience, at least, on just, let's say the sports that draw the most eyeballs, your footballs and your basketballs of the world. Those were great experiences for me. But, I called a lot of so many different sports. I like to say I called everything from football to fencing when I was a student there. And all those experiences shape you. So I point more toward the high quality athletic teams that make up Notre Dame's athletic department. I mean, there's national championship fencers at that school, and the team itself is a national championship program. And, soccer winning a national championship, and both men's and women's, a good volleyball program. I've called, their matches before. So I think all those things, with how good the athletic department is, a really good softball team, a really good baseball team, those types of things were awesome opportunities for someone like me, who was, like I said, just learning it and just kind of stumbling in, feeling my way through it, getting the chance to call a lot of different sports, and all these sports that were being played at a really high level. But despite that, with coaches and players too, but really the coaches who took the time to stop and talk and to teach me things. I really appreciate that.
When you got out of college, you started in minor league baseball, right? I'm curious
Yep.
about your experience. Everybody's had their own experiences, and I've talked to a bunch of guys. What was your experience like in minor league baseball with, I believe, what was it, the Tin Caps and then the Paw Sox?
Yep, exactly. So the first team I worked for right out of school was the South Bend Cubs, and so single A team right in South Bend. And so I actually did that beginning the second semester of my senior year of college, and then once graduating in May, was still working throughout that semester, that summer, and had just an awesome time there and such great people there. And then, yes, spent a season with the Tin Caps in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 2016, and just amazing people there as well. I really do feel like, I feel like I worked with, two of, and then three with the Paw Sox, three of the best minor league baseball organizations you could have. And I don't really think that's bias either. That's just the truth. And they have the awards to sort of back that up, if I can brag on them for a little bit. But yeah, so I did a year in each of those first two places, and then 3 years working with the Pawtucket Red Sox, and learned a ton there from people who were incredible to me and who have become, really, really close friends. And so, yeah, I feel really lucky in the places that I've had to go, that I've gotten to go in minor league baseball. And just the friends you make. I'm sure you've probably heard stories of that. It's a lifestyle where, you're in it with your teammates, and it's really fun.
How important are those connections? I know the Paw Sox kind of got you into NESN, which is how you got to the Red Sox. How important were those connections that you made in the minor leagues?
Yeah, I think of it more on like a friend level, and a personal level than I do a career level. Like, because it is your lifestyle, and like if you enjoy the people you're spending time with, and you care about one another, and you grow to be really good friends, like that to me is more important than the connection side of it. And I get that for sure, and I understand what you're asking. And absolutely, those things are important too. But really, I think the people you surround yourself with, and that you get lucky enough to learn from, is the biggest thing. And I could go through all those different teams that I worked for, and the different people who I learned a ton from, and who took a chance on me or gave me an opportunity. And I tell them all the time that I'm grateful for it. And there's just a lot of great people. And I think back to the 2020 season, and there being no minor league season. Like, that's what was hard for me, knowing how many great people there are who work for whatever team it is, and at other levels of athletics as well, whether it's college or pro. But so many great people who again, I sound like a broken record, but like, I really feel so fortunate to be close to in my life.
What was the 2020 season like for you? Eventually, college sports started up. You got football, basketball, baseball in the spring. What was it like? I know you did a lot from home, more than most. What was it like getting to work those games from home, and how did you kind of adapt to that new normal this season?
Yeah, it went really, really well. I mean, I think everyone would agree you'd much rather be at the sporting event. I don't think that's up for much debate. But that being said, I find it amazing, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. Like, the job that ESPN did on such a huge scale of finding a way for us to still broadcast, and for us to bring games, and for producers to produce games, and directors to direct it, and the announcers too to do their job. And to find a way to bring you so many sporting events on so many different channels and platforms that ESPN has, it truly blows my mind. Like, I would do basketball games sitting in one time zone, and my broadcast partner would be sitting in a different time zone, and there'd be a game being played somewhere else, not in the state that either of us were in. And that'd be where the producer and the director might be. And so the fact that like we could pull that off technologically was really cool to be a part of. But it was different for sure, sitting in a bedroom broadcasting, whatever sport it was, and maybe doing it at odd hours. I've called little league softball games at 9 a.m. I've called, college baseball regional games at 10 a.m. I didn't do any of the Korean baseball that was in the wee hours of the night or morning, depending on how you look at it. And then I've had, late night games as well. I did one of the most recent games I did, Giants Diamondbacks. That was a West Coast game. So I was probably finishing that up at midnight, sitting out here in Chicago and somehow, at least not to my knowledge, not waking the neighbors.
I always wondered what's the trick, because I know you had the Red Sox on their West Coast swing and you had the Giants Diamondbacks. What's the trick to getting through those 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night games?
I wish I drank less coffee than I did. Not that I drink an exorbitant amount. It'll probably grow over time, but a little afternoon or early evening cup of coffee, I would sneak in sometimes to give you an extra boost, because it is funny to think about, like, if your job as a broadcaster is to be on, so to speak, and to be, performing, to be doing your job at peak levels, peak performance, let's say from 7 to 10 p.m. or for a West Coast game, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. That is the time when, in theory, you need to be at your best. Whereas maybe all the other nights of the week, that's when I'm powering down and, lying on the couch.
Was there a big difference between having your partner on remotely from another area, wherever that may be, and getting to do the Red Sox games with Jerry and Dennis in the booth with you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, there is a difference, in doing it. The biggest thing I would say is technologically, like if you're not in the same location as your partner, there's some sort of delay. And then there's a little bit, I should say a little bit of a delay. And then on top of that, you're not sitting next to them and physically feeding off of their body language and sensing that. I might be looking at them on a screen to kind of gauge those things. And don't get me wrong, it's a great setup that allows us to do it. But, when I was at Fenway Park Memorial Day weekend and, Jerry Remy sitting, a foot, 2 feet away from me, I can see when he's going to talk and I can stay out of his way and let him do his great thing. And even when doing games remotely on the NESN side of things, you might be sitting in a booth, at the NESN studios, and still you're looking across physically at your partner, as I was, the West Coast swing you mentioned with Ellis Burks, who I was working with for those. So it is different for sure.
That must have been odd to 2 years ago get the chance to work Red Sox games. You get that late season series and you're going to be the new, I wouldn't call it voice of the Red Sox, but you're going to be doing Red Sox games on NESN. And then the next season, everything just goes crazy and you end up remotely. That must have been a very weird thing to have happen.
Yeah. It was different for sure. The thing I just kind of kept thinking about, not just specific to that, but to my career in general and to anyone's career, anyone who is affected by it, like it wasn't hard to think about, the bigger perspective of what we've all gone through in the last, year and a half now, how different things are. So it was an amazingly challenging, year across the world for so many people. And for me, like the fact that I had a job was more than enough for me to feel, more than satisfied with everything that was going on, and, to have my health and the health of my family and that sort of thing. But yeah, it is crazy to think about just how much is different in the broadcasting industry, just in the last year and a half.
Last question I want to ask you about calling games remotely. Where are you in terms of getting back in person with the Red Sox? I know they've set thresholds that teams have to meet. Are the Red Sox close to getting NESN back traveling with the team?
That's for sure above my pay grade, so I don't know the specifics on that. But I know for home games, the normal Red Sox team of Dave O'Brien and Jerry Remy and Dennis Eckersley and whatever combination it is for home games, they're back at Fenway, and they have been now for a couple of months. But beyond that, that's they get paid big bucks to make those decisions, not me.
What have you learned from Dave O'Brien? I'm sure he's got to be a pretty fascinating guy to talk to. What have you had a chance to really talk with him, given that you're his backup when he's on the road, you're filling in? Have you gotten a chance to talk with him, and what kind of tips has he given you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I look up to him as an announcer, so much, and I've been able to listen to him for so long. I remember when I was broadcasting games in the Cape League, driving down back and forth from where my family lives in Massachusetts down there, and popping on the radio on a drive back after one of our games and thinking of, oh, this is how one of the best to do it does it. Like, literally, what can I write down and take notes? And I had the chance to meet him as a college student when I was calling games in the Cape League, and he couldn't have been more gracious with his time and his tips and advice. And even last year during the season, reaching out and telling me about the remote broadcasting setup. But I think the world of him, obviously, as an announcer. And then I'm just so grateful for how he's treated me, and how everyone at NESN has welcomed me for being a small part of the team. They've made me feel really welcome.
What do you look for when you're listening to somebody? What stands out and makes you say, oh, this guy's really good? Or even the opposite, oh, I don't like this guy so much. What do you look for and listen for in a broadcast?
A lot of different things, and I guess it's hard for me to kind of boil it down to a checklist that maybe I go in with. But I think when I'm listening, it just different things strike you in different ways. Like, I think of the information that I'm hearing. First of all, am I learning things about the players and the teams and the coaches that is interesting? Like, that's part of our job, is to inform and to entertain. So what's the information that we're learning? I think that the chemistry with a partner or partners that you're working with is really important. I think people want to feel like they're sitting down to watch a game, and that it's an enjoyable experience, and they're shooting the breeze with someone next to them. So I think I look for that. I think I look for, like, the energy and engagement that a broadcaster has, and they get me excited watching a game, when I'm sitting watching a game as a fan. So it's interesting. I don't think of myself as the one, like, critically listening, but you're right. Like, when you do this for a living and you do it as your passion, you are always thinking about those things, because those are the things I'm thinking about and trying to be a better broadcaster with.
What is your process for self-critique? Do you have when you listen to an inning or a quarter of basketball, how long do you wait till after a game? What's your process to go back after broadcast and self-critique?
So I try to go back pretty quickly after it and just watch some of it. It might be a different amount each time. Like, maybe after a game, I'd go back and watch a half inning, and just like to hear how it sounded, and, oh, I think you did an okay job there, or yikes, like, you can do better on that, or you can have a better stat that you used, or a better follow-up question to the partner you're working with, or, gosh, you look really stiff on camera, or, hey, your energy could have been a little higher there. Like, those are the things I'm trying to look for. So I try to go back, maybe not that night right after a game. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I get a little lazy with it, but I do try to pretty quickly afterward watch some of it, because for me, it's fresh in my mind there. And if I put it off any longer, maybe I won't get around to doing it. But just to kind of, self-assess, where you're at, what things did you do well, what things did you not do well. And, the people who have been great to me in this industry have always stressed the importance of, being your harshest critic. Like, that's how you're going to get better. And I think, for some extent, for a lot of us, we still don't maybe love listening to ourselves or hearing our voices. It's like hearing your voice on an answering machine or something like that. And you got to do it, and find ways to self-assess.
One thing that always impressed me with your career and the way you've kind of risen up is your reels. Watching them in preparation to do the interview and kind of listening to the way you call a game, I was always very impressed, and I always thought they were very well put together. How do you find a good stretch or good highlights to put into a reel, and how did you go about putting together yours?
Well, thank you, first of all, Aiden. That's really nice of you to say. I don't know if there's a magic formula for it. I get people who ask me for thoughts on their reels on occasion, and there's no great answer. I've had hiring executives say to me before, hey, I literally have 3 minutes to watch this. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this reel is 6 minutes. Like, hopefully you like the first 3 minutes. But I think there are kernels of truth and that we can take from a comment like that of like, put your best stuff in the reel. And if you don't think it's your best, then don't put it in just to put it in. That's how, I try to approach it. Put your best stuff at the front of a reel, I think, because again, if someone's just flipping it on and maybe they don't even consciously say to themselves, I have X amount of time. Maybe subconsciously they're thinking, oh, I'll check this out. But then if in the first 2 minutes, they're not blown away because it's not your best stuff, well, maybe we missed an opportunity to really grab their attention. So that's kind of how I try to approach it. And those are kind of nebulous, I guess, guidelines that I try to go by. But, whatever your best stuff is, and, get it toward the front and put it in there and, make it something that is like consumable, if that makes sense, if that's even a word, that someone can pop on and say, okay, yeah, like I got the time to watch this. Like I watch this, I get a sense of who you are. I don't need like a 12-minute half inning where there's, 2 walks and 7 full counts. Like, let's cut to the chase, give you a sense of how you handle it on camera, some highlights, and, a stretch of basketball or baseball or football or whatever it is. That's what I think. And who knows, it's probably not the right answer.
I'm curious about how you got into the Big Ten network and the ACC network with the network jobs. How did you get those jobs from minor league baseball, and what kind of tricks did you pull out to be able to get to such a high level that early on?
Yeah, that's another thing where, again, for lack of a better answer, like there is no one right magic bullet, magic path. This is the way it's always going to happen. Those are the caveats to get out of the way. But just speaking from experience, for me, I called minor league baseball, and then in the winters, I would call college basketball games at Western Michigan University, calling men's and women's basketball games there. And again, this is a relationship thing. And if you think about it, really black and white, networking, and I need to take the next step, I'm not sure that that's like the best approach. Like if you go into this with, hey, I love broadcasting, I love the craft of broadcasting, I want to get better at this. If you go in with that being your focus, I think you're bound to get better, and you're bound to open yourself up to opportunities. And that doesn't mean you don't need to, meet people and network, so to speak. But I think if the approach is, hey, I'm trying to get better at this, pick out an announcer that you think does a really good job, and say to them, hey, like, would you mind listening to a sample of my broadcasting? I love the way that you broadcast the game, and I'd love to hear the things I can do better. I mean, I've sent an email like that countless times, and I've learned so much. And there's so many people in this industry who are willing to help. And that doesn't just go for announcers. Like, I think that goes for different hiring executives as well, who are willing to take the time, because they're really good people. And I definitely know that firsthand from my time at Big Ten Network, and people who are good friends, not just were bosses, when I was working there, because they took the time to help me and to give me advice even before I was working there. And the same thing with ESPN and ACC Network, like people who I had met before I got hired there. And I think if that comes from a place of natural, looking to get better and form a relationship rather than to always take the next step, I think that's the right approach. And I'll get off the sermon there and finish up. But that's how I approach it.
What changes do you make when you're going from doing primarily minor league baseball and team sports with Western Michigan to a different team every week? And I guess the Big Ten, it's repetitious with the same teams in the conference, but a different game, different teams every week that you don't know so much about. What kind of changes do you make there?
Yeah, it's very different for sure, to be with the team day in, day out versus, yeah, you might be popping in and seeing the team once a season, or maybe you missed them one year and you're going to see them the next year. Like, I didn't see North Carolina basketball this year, so if I have a North Carolina basketball game next year, the last time I called it was pre-pandemic, when they had Cole Anthony on their team. So I think that the level of preparation that you do becomes important, and how you prepare. Like, you don't have time to necessarily know every single thing that you would know if you're around a team every day, but it's about finding the ways to really be caught up to speed. I like looking at press conferences that coaches and players have done. And in this day and age, there's so many athletic departments who are posting full press conferences to YouTube. And so I try to crank through as many of those as I can. And so I can hear what a coach has been saying all season. And I don't have to ask questions that are, have already been asked maybe multiple times to a head coach over the course of a season. And more importantly, that I already know the things that are being talked about, and that's kind of the pulse of the team and the discourse around the team. And so that you can better serve the fan base in broadcasting a game that they're going to be watching. And, you want to know as much as the fans know, because, it's their team, and you're a steward of their season and that game and that opportunity. So, the onus is on us to do right by the fans. And then also I think of it as like doing right by the players and the coaches and, the teams too. You want to do right by them because this is their life and this is the most important thing that they might have going on. And so you want to document it properly in that case.
Do you prefer one to the other, learning about new teams and getting to learn new stories versus the repetition of one team every day and getting to kind of really learn more in-depth stuff about that team?
A really interesting question. I don't think I do. I don't think I prefer one more than the other. I think there's beauty in both, of being with a team all season and, really getting to know guys like guys from minor league baseball who maybe I still stay in touch with, and those sorts of things from, players who were on those teams, or then you see them down the road and you feel like you know them a little bit more than, covering one college basketball game, where it's not like you're really getting to know, let's say, a player on that team if you're just covering them once a season. But I do think there's real beauty in both.
I'm curious about those minor league contexts. Do they help you kind of learn the game a little bit better? And because I know the joke is always, oh, you're a broadcaster, you don't know the game. And that's kind of what the analyst is for. But do you feel like those contacts kind of help you learn a little bit more about minor league baseball or football or basketball?
Definitely. And I think it's how much you're open to listening. Like, whether it's the partner you're working with on a game or the coaching staff and players. Like, when I was in minor league baseball, my first season, the 2015 season with the South Bend Cubs, our manager, Jimmy Gonzalez, was kind enough, like, I could go in and do a 3-minute radio interview with him in his office right after the game. And like the things that you can learn from a manager sitting there giving you that time, whenever you want it, you can learn a lot about the game. And the same thing at every level, but another example, like the Pawtucket manager, my first couple of years there, an awesome guy by the name of Kevin Bowles. Like he came from a little bit of more of a scouting background at previous stops in his career. And so some of the things that he would say, like, I learned about a way that, the scouts and the front office people are viewing the game. And he would refer to, like, a breaking ball that curled in for a strike, a called strike, as like a land strike. That was the first time I had heard that term. And I've heard it from other places. And like scouts talking about a guy who can land his breaking ball for a strike. And I've heard Nate Eovaldi with the Red Sox talk about like stealing strikes, and it's the same idea. And things you pick up along the way just by listening to the people who really know what they're talking about, and you try to learn what you can.
Take me through a typical weekend for you preparing for college football versus college basketball or baseball or any other sport.
I would say, football is a beast unto itself. You might find out which game in particular you've got at the beginning of the week, or maybe a little bit more in advance. But if you have a game every week, it's not like you're getting too far ahead. So really that's an all week affair, getting ready for a game and trying to, take a crash course on all the information you need with roster sizes that big. College basketball, smaller rosters, there's not as much you need to know, but there's more games. They've played more games. If you're seeing the team toward the end of the season, maybe they've played 20 games by the time you're seeing them, and you're trying to kind of get caught up to speed on everything. Baseball, also different. It's not as important to, let's say, in football or a hockey, to be able to ID players as quickly, because obviously the pace of baseball is much slower, and you don't need to worry about on the fly substitutions and reading jersey numbers as quickly. But I think you got to have a knack for storytelling. And so maybe the information there is maybe a little more fleshed out. Not that you can't tell stories throughout a football game as well, but every play there's action in football. Whereas with baseball, you're not getting that. So maybe having, the stories and the stuff that you want to get into, you have a little bit more time to chew off some meat on the bone.
When you do a basketball game or a football game with, say, Duke, and it's a team that everybody knows, Duke basketball, most of the players you're going to be familiar with, what do you look for in preparation as opposed to, say, a college baseball game where fans don't necessarily know those teams and aren't so familiar with the players?
Yeah, awesome question, because there is a difference. I always consider the listener. I think though I didn't come from it, that's a Syracuse, I think, ideology that has been passed down. I hope I attribute it correctly, but to Marty Glickman, I believe maybe that first came from, and I heard it along the way in the Cape League. But consider your listener. So yeah, if you're broadcasting a game where you think the people tuning in maybe don't know your teams as well, you can probably approach things a little more big picture and introduce things that, maybe for the real hardcore diehard fan of a certain team, they know that stuff. But from a big picture perspective, for the audience that you have, considering your listener, maybe you got to go into that again. Whereas with a Duke basketball game, it's not every time I need to go fully into detail on just exactly who Jalen Johnson is and his situation. Let's say last season when he was playing, I don't need to fully describe every little thing with his foot and his recruitment and how high his recruiting ranking was. Some of that, absolutely, you're going to get into to different respects, but maybe the question is a little bit more, okay, well, what did he do yesterday getting worked out on the floor with John Shire, his assistant coach? What was their workout like, and provide a different level of maybe minutia that the fan doesn't get anywhere else. Hopefully you're able to bring some sort of information like that to them.
You mentioned always consider your audience. You've worked with a bunch of different audiences, where in minor league baseball, it's mainly fans of the team. And with the Red Sox, it's mainly Red Sox fans. But you've also worked kind of nationally with the ACC network and Big Ten network, where those are more a wider spectrum of people watching those games. Is there a big difference in how you call a game between who's watching and what the network is expecting?
Yeah, I would say it's a similar answer, because let's say, here's a great example. Like, I did a 3-game college baseball series this year between Clemson and Virginia back in the regular season in April. Friday and Saturday, the games were on ACC Network. Sunday, the game was on ESPN2. So the Friday and Saturday broadcasts are going to be very different. I shouldn't say very different. They're going to be different than the broadcast on Sunday on ESPN2, because the thinking being, you're going to have casual sports fans who are flipping through ESPN2 as a part of, maybe even subconsciously, the way they channel surf, or maybe they just had that on in their house. Nothing against a different channel or a different outlet or a digital broadcast, but there's just going to be more eyeballs on that channel on average. And so I think you owe it to the different people who might just happen to be tuning in. And so maybe we are introducing players a little bit differently. And instead of a guy coming up and saying, all right, junior left fielder Kier Meredith was 2 for 4 last night, maybe I say, all right, here's Kier Meredith, the junior left fielder, really talented, drafted by the Cubs out of high school, and has battled injuries throughout his career. The Clemson fans, who are the diehards watching on ACC Network, they would know that. So maybe I don't need to say that as much or as often. But on ESPN2, when, again, you have presumably fans who aren't as familiar with it, maybe that's a chance to kind of give a more cursory look at a player to fully paint their picture.
How about the analysts getting to work with so many different guys from so many different spectrums, with usually former players, and you're working with the network analysts versus the Red Sox homers with Jerry and Dennis? What is it like getting to meet a new analyst and getting to work with them and kind of figuring out your groove with them?
I think it's one of the most rewarding parts of this industry and the job. Like, you get to meet new people, and so many of those people like become really good friends because you spend a lot of time with them. They're your teammate, though you're not playing. And I think that's one of the best parts of this. And I mean, certainly one of the things I enjoy most and appreciate the most. And the people I've been able to meet and spend time with, I think of college basketball, calling a ton of games the last couple of years with Dan Bonner. Like Dan Bonner and I wouldn't otherwise know each other, but we've been pulled together to do so many games together. And I appreciate our friendship so much, and certainly respect the long career he's had, more than 40 years and 30 plus years doing the NCAA tournament. You get to meet those people, and like a Salima Rockwell and Laura Bush and Audrey Flaw and people like that I've broadcast volleyball with back at Big Ten Network, and people who've become, again, really good friends just because you call a lot of games together. So yeah, I think you can tell just by the way I kind of light up, like that's one of the best parts of it.
How do you, what's the difference with working with a guy like, we'll say Sean O'Hara, who's doing Big Ten Network, and they're there nationally, versus when you're doing a Red Sox game and you're with Dennis Eckersley and everybody knows Dennis? What's the difference between working with those two?
Interesting. I don't know if I've thought about that too much. I guess maybe like when you're doing a national, type of broadcast, let's say Sean O'Hara and I calling college football games like we have in the past, you're kind of both in it together, like trying to learn the information. And not that you're not in it together, let's say doing a team broadcast, but like Dennis Eckersley, Jerry Remy, whoever it is, like, they've lived the Red Sox season. There's no like, we both need to get caught up to speed on anything. But then, baseball is different. There's the daily repetition of it and that sort of thing. So interesting. I haven't really thought too much about that, but I think stylistically, maybe less so about the analyst, but just what the broadcast is about, it's different.
I want to finish up asking about Little League, just because this is what I happen to be in at this point in the season, with games that probably not going to happen tonight. They're probably going to get rained out. But this week, the Connecticut State Tournament. What was it like working those Little League games? Have you done it before? And what was your experience like working those Little League games with kind of a whole brand new audience?
Yeah. Another thing that is one of the absolute coolest things I've been able to do in this industry. So 2019, I did do some Little League broadcasting. It was the Junior League Softball World Series out in Kirkland, Washington, that I was one of the announcers for. And it was one of the coolest things, like I said, that I've done. And then getting a chance to do more Little League softball in the last week, and we'll do some Little League baseball coming up in the coming weeks. And it's fun, like it's the purity of sports. And I don't know about you, like, but I played Little League and I look back on it as one of the great times, like in sports for me and of my childhood. And you're playing with your friends, and specifically for Little League, like I remember being 12 years old, and the only thing I cared about all summer was like, we got to make it to Williamsport. And that was the most important thing that was going on in 12-year-old Mike Monaco's time in his life at that point, and just wanting to do that. And so I think, that sort of experience a lot of us can relate to, where, these kids are playing, having fun with their best friends from their hometown. And, they're not used to being on TV or getting interviewed or not even, being in the newspaper before. And they're so eager to share their stories and to tell you fun, different things about their personality. And it's just an absolute blast. So one of the coolest things that I've had the chance to do.
Is it different? Do you bring kind of a different style into calling a game for an 11 or 12-year-old that you don't
Definitely.
for the college guys?
Definitely. No doubt. Like, I'm not going to sit there and linger on, like 2 errors by the shortstop today. Like, no one needs to hear that, that's not the point of this. Like, and I'd rather tell you a story instead of saying, okay, here's the shortstop, Jordan Dry. She's 1 for 9 at the tournament. I'd rather say, hey, like Saturday, she ripped a triple to the wall, or say, her favorite player is Monica Abbott, and she dreams one day of being a lawyer because she says that she's very good at arguing with her older siblings. Like, those things I think are more fun for an audience to hear. And if you're flipping around on TV and you stumble across and you hear, oh, a Little Leaguer's, 3 for 7 at the plate. Okay. Like, well, great. But if I hear a fun story, I'm going to be like, oh, that's cool. Like, I want to tune in and like watch this kid. He seems like he's got a lot of personality, or she seems really funny, like the team jokester.
Last 3 questions that I ask everybody. Who's a broadcaster you've always wanted to meet, dead or alive?
Wow. 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 That's a good question.
It's usually the one that gets everybody out. No one ever thinks of it.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a good one. I've never met Brent Musburger, and boy, that's a voice of college football for me. So I'll say Brent Musburger. That would be really cool to meet him.
Favorite stadium or arena, and you've had a lot of them that you've gotten to broadcast a game from.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to boil it down to one, but certainly Fenway Park and Notre Dame Stadium, both very close to home for me. So those would be the first two, and then a little bit, I guess, one that isn't a personal connection to me. Cameron Indoor Stadium was incredible to walk in there for the first time, and I'm taking pictures and video, and it was so cool being there.
What advice do you have to young kids that want to get into the business and move up like you do?
Have a passion for it, follow your passion. If that's, what you want to do, go pursue it, and don't let anyone outwork you. And that sounds like maybe like a throwaway statement or kind of cliche, but really, like, work hard at it and be curious and ask people for advice and for help and be willing to learn and, to find ways to get better and work hard at this. And remember, like, it's fun, it's sports, and if you got a passion for it, go do it. Like, don't let anyone stop you.
If people want to find Mike Monaco, watch a game that you're doing, where can they find you?
I would say probably Twitter is probably the best spot, at Mike Monaco _ at the end of it there. Not to be confused with who has the at Mike Monaco account. We haven't worked out a deal yet for that. No, I kid, but that's probably the best place. I'm typically updating if I'm broadcasting a game, that'll give you the info on where to watch if you find yourself interested.
Well, Mike, congratulations on such a great career already, and look forward to watching you continue to rise up over the years. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aiden. I really appreciate you having me, and looking forward to seeing what you do in your career too. No doubt you're going to do big things.